Yep. All right. Good morning. My name again is Zikria Syed. Thank you for the kind introduction. I am here, pleased to be here and share with you some of my experiences, and particularly given the audience, my transition from corporate world to an entrepreneurial world. So I thought that may be informative or at least entertaining for some of you. And along with that goes some of the learnings that I had and experiences. It's not so much advice as it is sharing, what I went through and many of the other entrepreneurs go through. And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't share with you, what I'm working on now, which is the current venture, Patient Wing. So excited to be here. And again, what works for me sometimes doesn't work again. But I still thought I should share some of those, steps and experiences that I have in the entrepreneurial journey. So what I would like to do is just share a little bit about myself and tell you how I got to where I am today, and hopefully some of that relates. So I actually grew up in Pakistan, came to the United States as a undergrad student, went to a small school in Pennsylvania. Julie tells me that most of the folks are not from Pennsylvania. So if you haven't been to Lock Haven, you probably don't know where it is, and especially out-of-state people don't know where Lock Haven is. So it's a small school in central Pennsylvania, got an undergrad degree there, and then I came to Drexel University for master's. And for like most of us, after that I started in the corporate world, working at a company called Siemens Medical Systems, and that was my first job out of college. And I was hired to fix the software system that was there. And and by the way, I identify myself as a engineer, even though I don't have an engineering degree. I have bachelor's in computer science and master's in computer science. But I think of engineers as builders and designers, and that's what I think I do. You may disagree with that, but anyway, so I started at Siemens Medical Systems. I was hired as a programmer to fix the system, and this is something you can always probably relate with. There were a lot of problems, and I wasn't given enough time to fix that. So it was a very frustrating experience for me. But interestingly enough, because the software was problematic, the issues were escalated to me from customers. So what happened was that I was in front of customers a lot, and it was the first job out of college, 6 months into the job, in front of a lot of customers. And the interesting thing that happened there was, even though I wasn't able to help them really because software wasn't very good, but just learning to work with them, empathizing, understanding their situation. And when they saw that I was making a good effort on their part or on their behalf, they were very, very, supportive and helped me to understand how to work with customers. So that was a great experience for me. I moved from there on. I couldn't last too long because I couldn't fix the software, and it's a frustrating experience, but I found another job in the same company from there, and I worked on that, and we built the system, and a lot of good experience. And what I learned from there was that I learned a couple of things. One was that I was a builder. At least I thought I was a builder. And the second was working with customers was fun and exciting. So that is a big part of the entrepreneurial journey, is can you reach out to people who have a certain problem and have desire to fix that problem, and then hopefully get them to believe that you can help them, right? So that was a great experience. I ended up leaving the company because ultimately it didn't have enough, I thought I didn't have enough challenge. I wanted to do new things, so I joined Microsoft. This is mid-90s, long time ago. It was a much smaller company, and my job was working with customers, and it turned out I didn't like it so much because I was with them all the time, and it's not fun. It's better when you see them and then you leave, right? And hopefully you can relate with that. So that was fun, but it was frustrating at the same time. What I learned, and I spent a lot of years there, was my true passion. My true passion was building software and then present it to customers as opposed to live with them, right? So anyway, so that's a little bit of my background. From there, I went I got tired of that, and at that point I wanted to do something different, and working in another big company didn't seem like a good idea, or working for a small company didn't seem like a good idea either. So I figured I'll start my own company. So this is where my entrepreneurial experience comes in. I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years, on to my third startup, and all three were different, different problems to solve, different paths to growth and success, but all three in the same industry. So what I'm going to share a little bit with you is what are the key steps that I took, or how did I manage my journey going through this process of, hey, I have an idea, it's the best idea I got, I'm really excited, and I think there is a business. How do I build that business, right? So this concept of going from an idea to creating a business that is real, right? It pays the bills, it's helpful to customers, and people like working in this company, all the things you think about. I'm not talking about how to build a very successful business, because that's a different story, right? But how to get to that business is step one, right? If most of you probably know 90% of the businesses fail, right? So only 10% actually become something, right? And a very small percentage of the businesses become something much more successful. It's a very complex topic, but I'm at least here to share with you how I go through that journey, because I started 3 companies from scratch, and it's not fun, I can tell you that, but it's a process, and so that's the 5 steps, it's not ultimately going to tell anybody, how to create a business. You have to figure that out yourself, but at least that's a process that I followed. So what I'm going to do is really tell you a little bit about my businesses, and then as we go through the different steps, I will use examples of how this related to my experience. So in terms of my entrepreneurial career, I started with a company called, we call it Broadpeak. That was my first business. I sold it in less than 2 years. And this is my first foray into entrepreneurism. I left Microsoft with not really a good idea about what a business people would want to buy from. So it wasn't really a good idea. It was basically an idea. And so I started with that. I pivoted quickly into the pharmaceutical industry, got a few customers, and ended up selling that company in less than 2 years. And then came up with some ideas in the process that told me what a more viable business could be. And that's where I started my second company, which was like 3 years, from the first, because, once I sold it in 2 years, I had to work there for a year. So I started my second company. This company took off very quickly. In 4 years, it was like 10 million in revenue. We're Inc. 500, the fastest growing in Philadelphia, signed a lot of customers, did global expansion, raised a lot of money, and so a very different trajectory in that business. And I sold that in 2015. And then started the third company, and I promised myself that this is the last company I'm going to ever do, because it's a very painful process. Because starting from scratch is it's a lonely and difficult process, but it's fun, right? So that's why we do it. And this company has a very different trajectory. We're 4 years into it, and interestingly enough, it hasn't grown the way the first one did. It has a slower trajectory. We pivoted, and I think it's an amazing future in front of us, or I wouldn't be working on it, but it doesn't have the same trajectory. So when things are working, you think you're the smartest person, and when things aren't working, you have a lot of doubts. And I think what I've learned is that there's a bit of luck, there's a bit of situation too. So now I'm a little bit more humble, thinking about, it wasn't all me that made it successful. It's a lot of things. So here we go. So it's really about creating businesses, and hopefully, you will find something interesting and worthwhile in this. And again, at the end, of course, I'll tell you about my current business and why it's the most amazing thing. But we go to an interesting survey if we can find it. There it is. So I get asked a lot, sometimes. So, why do you do it? Or, and I thought I would, be a good question for the audience to take your, smartphones out or whatever you have to see what you think is a good reason to start a new business, right? So you can go to the link up there and respond, and it's going to do real-time updates, I think. I have to sign in?
No, we have.
Oh.
Why?
You shouldn't have to sign up. You should be able to just, or maybe just enter your name. Yep. Julie is the expert at this.
There's very poor reception.
Oh, I see.
Like text 20%.
Yeah.
You have one result.
There you go. Are we seeing any results or no?
Yeah, but we're not seeing it.
Ah. It's not updating?
Yeah, but it's not giving you the bar graph.
Yeah. Which is weird. Well, that kind of.
We can just pull up the software.
Ready? Yep. Let's do that. Yeah, it was doing it for me.
Right, once it enters Keynote.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Oh, that's why. Let's see what it looks like now.
Maybe put it in a presentation. Oh, there you go.
So
Awesome.
let's fix the other one too. On here. That one's on. I'll just activate it since we're here. Oh, no, I shouldn't activate it. Because it will activate, right? There we go.
All right, fantastic.
Oh, there, it's live.
Yep, there it is. We got, how many responses have we got? We got a few.
So, 37607.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I get a lot of times the reaction I get from people a lot of times is, oh, it must be fun to be your own boss. And my answer usually is like, no, it's not. No, it's not, And I wanted to see what, engineers think. And for me, it's really about pursuing an idea, And of course, making money because ultimately, if the idea doesn't make any money, then it's probably not worth a lot, right? Or worthwhile to pursue. So my simple, goal really is to pursue the ideas that I'm passionate about, and then money is usually, or success of the business is a litmus test for the value of the idea, right? If nobody wants to pay for it, it's probably not worthwhile. So the money follows. So I thought this would be fun, and the other reason I left was that I was just bored, right? It's boring to work sometimes on the same job with a lot of people, not much progress. Where hopefully you can pursue your ideas a lot faster and better when you're an entrepreneur. So that's why you would do it, and then the biggest thing then is what's a good idea to pursue, right? We all have good ideas, and we think they're the greatest, and And so I have, what I call litmus test, right? So again, there's no, perfect answer, but the litmus test is really, hey, if it passes these litmus tests, then it's probably, worth pursuing, right? And if the idea doesn't pass with litmus test, then it's dead on arrival. You can do all you want. It's probably not going to go anywhere. Even though it passes, it doesn't mean it's a guaranteed success, but at least, it is worth pursuing the idea. So the first one, again, goes back to money is, is this something that you will get paid for, right? Can you identify people who both have the ability to pay and willingness to pay, right? So when I first founded my first company, it was CRM software. This is when Salesforce, if you're familiar with that, was just coming out. Concept of a cloud-based CRM seemed great, right? So that's how I started. That was the best idea I could come up with. And very quickly I learned that it's hard to find those customers. They were willing to pay me $50 a month or $100 a month. It's not going to pay the bills, right? So that was the idea. I could find those people who could pay for it, but they weren't the type of people I wanted, right? Their ability to pay wasn't matching up, even though their willingness was there. I couldn't make the sale to the big company. So that's when we kind of pivoted to the pharma industry, where average sale price is very different, right? So if you're B2B, you're making a sale of 50,000, 100,000 or something like that. So that's much more palatable. Get 4 sales, you got something going, right? So that's the number one idea, concept. The second thing is, people say, hey, I have this amazing idea. And I ask them, is anybody else is doing it? Nobody's doing it. Well, that's probably not a good thing, right? Because if nobody's ever thought of it and nobody's tried it, then it's basically a new market. And it may very well be a good idea, but you have to create the market first. You have to create awareness first, right? So I'm not saying don't do it, just be willing and prepared to create that awareness, and it's a very costly process, right? And then you get to the sale of that. So that's second. Again, I'm not saying you can't do it, but just be prepared to deal with that, right? And so the third thing that I think about is can you actually, right? I mean, I see people and sometimes we have ideas that are amazing, right? But there's just no way to deliver on that. And can you, within your resources or your skills or your abilities, can you create something that is valuable and differentiated in the market? So these are like simple rules. Let's say if you're not, I sometimes run into people who have no software background, want to create this software thing. I'm like, well, how are you going to do it, right? I mean, you have never done this before. How will you find the people and resources to do it? I just hire somebody. Well, it's hard for them, So the point is they have to have either the money, the resources to create. So that's the third thing. And the fourth one is ability to reach customers, because if you never found them, you're never going to make the sale, right? And most people don't have the ability. You have to figure out a way to find that customer, whether you're a business customer, and sometimes you're the insider. If you're in the industry, you already know the people, you can go and sell to them, right? But if you don't know how to reach customers and find customers, you're going to have a hard time, or you're going to have to bring other people to do it. And the last thing really is close the deal, because you have a lot of tire kickers out there, right? So again, these are some of the things. If you never close the sale, you can make 100 sales pitches. It's not going to do a thing for you, and it's very, very hard to make a sale when you're a startup, right? Because the risk is enormous. I just looked at we were a startup company 4 years in, and I just looked at our Dun & Bradstreet rating, and it was like risky. I'm like, if a customer does the test, because it's a startup, right? There's no credit history, and so it's a very risky proposition. So you have to think about why customers would or wouldn't buy from you, and if you don't have the ability to close the deal, you're not going to do it. So that's kind of, pick the idea, make sure that you are somewhat prepared to execute on it. You have the resources and the right market. And this is where, one of the biggest learnings we had was, get the customers first if you can, right? So instead of building the product first, get the customers first. So get the early adopters, because, especially when you're B2B, or everybody wants to know who else is doing it, right? I mean, the reason, we are doing Blue Apron is because our friends are doing it, right? So, and the same thing happens in the business environment. Actually, it's worse, right? Nobody wants to be the very first one. So if you can get people to say, hey, we're using it, we love it, even though they're your friends, even though you gave them a free deal. And that's how it works, right? Because they are a real business, who are your real friends, who will actually use it. They're not just doing you a favor, they'll use it, but they trust you, So that's huge, and this whole concept of lean startup, right? Everybody's talking about lean startup and minimum viable product and all that. And the whole idea there is get it in the customer's hands quickly. So that's one of the things that worked very well for us at NextDocs, right? So before we even built the product, I actually found my friends, and the company was my friends, but they were actual real users. So they said, sure, we'll use it. We said, we'll give it to you literally for free. And when they launched the product, we already had customers using it. And that became a huge selling point for us. And the key thing is really, you can't, nobody's going to sell. Product isn't going to sell for you. You got to sell. So that's a message I have for all the entrepreneurs. And I mean, I have a lot of friends, and we have incubators here. And again, I ask people, are you selling? Is anybody buying your stuff? But these days, everybody's focused on fundraising, as opposed to building and selling products. But selling is key. So that's kind of what works for me. And if nobody's buying it, it's not a good idea, right? So the thing is, then get the customers to use it fast, and then you iterate on it, right? Get the feedback, because that's the real feedback. Otherwise, your return on investment is very low. Right? Because you're building things without knowing whether somebody will ever use it or not. But if customers are giving feedback, then the product is getting better. Customer satisfaction hopefully is getting better. Your sales pitch is getting better. Everything is getting better, right? If you're doing this, and that's the whole idea. My business is, I think, getting customers quickly, and then getting their feedback, engaging with them closely, and refining the product is the key. When we are able to do it, we're successful. When we don't do it, we run into a lot of challenges. So, but the bad news is it doesn't always work, And interestingly enough, my, third company, which I'm, working on now, is where we pivoted. And so you would think that, hey, it's done a couple of times, you would get it right. And we did kind of get it right, but we didn't execute right. And we built the product first before we got the early adopters. Maybe we were too confident, right? And then we got sidetracked and ended up, right? I found myself in a situation, we had a product that I didn't think market wanted to buy it. It was a great product, it was a nice product, but just the market didn't need that product from us, because there are too many vendors already doing a good job. There is the premium provider, there is freemium, there is the free, there is the in-between. It's like, I can't give it away, because the other people are already giving it away, right? So that's when, I basically told myself that I can't sell it. Or even if I sell it, it's going to be a long, long journey for us to get there. And what happened in the time was, talking to a lot of customers, we heard consistently a different problem. And the problem was, we can't find patients in clinical trials. We were building software tools to run clinical trials. So it was a big, pivot. We pivoted. My team actually came to me and said, look, we think this is a great idea. I'm like, yeah, that's what the customers want. So we pivoted 2.5 years ago. And, so making good progress, but the idea is that you have to be realistic. Nobody is Superman, and I see people sticking to the ideas for too long. I ran into this one guy, and he was selling smart tags for luggage. I'm like, who's going to buy it? He's like, frequent flyers. I say, frequent flyers never check in their bags. They carry on. He's like, well, then the airlines don't want to give anybody. They're already giving stuff. And he's like, how many years have you been at it? And he's like, 3 years. I was like, look, time to maybe switch. He didn't like the idea. But the truth is that you can't stick with the idea for too long. I think that's a mistake a lot of us can make. So that's something to think about. Pivoting is huge. But here's the irony in all this. And he's supposedly pretty smart, right? Einstein. But I found this code, and he says, I stick with the ideas the longest. So I'm not necessarily saying be stubborn and chase a bad idea or the problem, right? The key word he's using is a problem, not the idea. Is, I stick with them longer. And if I can attribute to whatever success I've had, it is probably perseverance. People give up too fast, or they just chase the wrong idea, Too many people are just giving up. They want instant success, in a year, 18 months, and they're not prepared, right? And another quote I found that was resonated pretty well with me, that the road to success is paved with failures, right? So when you are an entrepreneur, how many times you get a no? A lot. And how many times you get a yes, so we'll buy it? A few times. And how many of them actually buy is even lower. So that's kind of my my learnings and experience and my advice to people typically is, hey, it's at least 2 to 3 years, right? Most entrepreneurs aren't ready to invest that much time, it's 2 to 3 years before you can build a business, and especially when you're technology or B2B, it's going to take some time. So how do you build? And that's what everybody's talking about now in the entrepreneurial world. So how long a runway do you have, right? The runway you have is a year, 2 years, 3 years. If you have a year runway, then you're probably in trouble, right? It's going to be really hard. You have to raise a lot of money and figure that out really fast. But so my litmus test is, you have to be prepared to be 2 to 3 years. That's been the consistent theme for me. 2 years is what I use. If I'm not making sales in 2 years, then I'm probably solving the wrong problem, right? Or I'm not, generating some money. So that's been the rule of thumb. My first company, I sold it in 2 years. That was, making money, right? I didn't make any money through the process, but so that's the few years that you have to invest in it, and most entrepreneurs, I think, are not prepared for that and give up too soon. So that's my learnings. I'd be happy to answer questions at the end, and I'm really excited to tell you about patient wing and what that is about, and hopefully it will resonate, with some of the problems we're solving, as engineers today. So patient wing is about, matching or finding patients for clinical trials. And clinical trials, for those of you who are familiar, it is the process by which new drugs or drugs are tested before they are generally available, right? So whether it's aspirin or whether it's a more serious drug for a more serious disease, has to be tested in a controlled way before FDA would approve it, right? So, and I'm sure just about every one of us seen or heard the ads for clinical trials, in subways and everywhere else, right? So the question that is interesting is, and I'm going to put that up here again, hopefully this will work, is how many clinical trials are actually running, right? Can you, when I put 3 numbers up there, can you guys take a guess at that? I figure it's a smart audience. You're engineers, you are good with logic. It's got to be the bigger number. And it is true, right? It is 55,000 plus clinical trials. And it doesn't make a lot of sense because it's a big number. Why would it be, so many trials? And that is why it becomes very, very difficult to recruit patients, and it has become the #1 problem in the industry, right? So it is the #1 problem in the industry, finding patients for clinical trials. And I'll share a few things with you. So one is that it's a big industry, right? So it's a big industry. It's, you know, $1 trillion plus industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and almost $200 billion are spent in bringing new drugs to market. So it's a big industry, big problem, but it has become the #1 problem because there's just so many trials, right? How do you, it's not just a matter of finding the right patient, it's just how does anybody even know what trial is available or what you're looking for and all that, and then it's a problem on every end, right? So, and there are 40,000 research sites, and people aren't looking for trials, and it's just a big mess, right? It's a big mess. And the numbers are terrible because 90% of the clinical trials are delayed. You know, so 90+ of the clinical trials are delayed, and it's a, you know, numbers of, you know, how big a problem it is. There's cost $2 billion, $10 billion, you know, different reports you get, right? And the interesting thing is the billions and billions of dollars are being spent to find those patients. And I want to share some more, you know, interesting things about clinical trials too. So when we think about clinical trials, we're thinking about, you know, those patches you put in the college, you know, campuses to test things. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about drugs that are coming to market and not haven't been fully tested. So, and many of these drugs are really for conditions that have no treatment, right? So think about Parkinson's, right? Parkinson's has absolutely no treatment. You know, everything is about you know, treating the symptoms, right? Same thing with Alzheimer's, right? So there are dozens and dozens of trials running, and it's a very meaningful thing. It's a very meaningful thing for those patients because they're getting nothing, right? And then you go into rare diseases, the same thing is happening. Rare diseases, you know, it's a life-altering, you know, and debilitating diseases. And one example that I hear about a lot is the Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is basically, you know, form of muscular dystrophy that primarily inflicts boys. And you know, by I think before age 10 they are wheelchair bound, and most of them, you know, vast majority, you know, die in their early 20s, right? So these are diseases that are basically killing people, and that's where it becomes such a big thing that it becomes so many trials because there's so many different diseases, and the occurrences of diseases are very, very small too. So, you know, we're talking to customer when we say, you know, pharmaceutical companies are trying to bring treatments to market, and their patient population is 5,000 potential patient population in the entire country. You know, so that's how fine-grained, you know, or rare these diseases are. And of course, the economics work for them because they're charging, you know, lot more money, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for treatment. So anyway, so that's the problem, and the concept that we came up with is how do we find those patients? And the concept we came up with is to directly reach out to patients. You know, today most recruitment is done through researchers, right? So basically the challenge is, you know, you recruit these researchers who recruit the patients, and most of these pharma companies don't meet their goals because, you know, those researchers are busy, right? They are doctors who are treating patients, and they may have many other responsibilities as well. So our concept is to create an online platform that makes it easy for patients to discover those trials. And then on the other side, what we do is that we target those patients. So if you're talking about Duchenne muscular dystrophy, then we would basically run online ads that say, if anybody, you know, searching for Duchenne muscular dystrophy may get a link, there's a new treatment being tested, would you be interested in participating in that trial? And these patients are, you know they don't have alternative, they're very, very plugged in, right? They're interested in finding out what's going on because their life depends on it, right? So we created this platform, it loads up all the trials, and then what we do is that when we work with pharma companies or research sites, we market those trials, right? And they pay for those things. So how we market for those trials is that we use primarily digital outreach. So it would be running simple things as ads, but could be finding these online advocacy groups or support groups, and then communicating with them and saying there's a trial running. And then the whole concept of the platform is we'll generate demand, we'll bring them to the trial page, inform them about the specific trial, and encourage them to participate in the trial. So this thing, what we are learning is more than 50% of the people are using their phones, right? So that's why we show the phone screen, but it works on a computer too. So when we bring them to the trial page, we'll educate them, so they can see all the things that are going on. What is the criteria for it? Whether they even qualify for it or not. Interestingly enough, most drug treatments don't take the worst patients because they want to find the middle, right, where they can make an impact. So if a person who's already passed, was 22 for Duchenne, they're not going to be in a trial. They're looking for 9-year-olds who they can slow the progression of the disease, right? That's where they find. The only exception is cancer, right? Because cancer, they're looking for their first-line treatment, second-line, third-line treatment. So that's where they're looking for people sometimes, or a lot of times whose disease has progressed. But anyway, so that's the idea. These are thousands and thousands of trials running for, a lot of these are for very, very serious conditions. People desperately need those treatments. It's a win-win-win if you can connect them, right? That patient gets a life-saving treatment, the drug goes to market faster so that, a lot of other people can benefit from it. The pharma companies, of course, most times trying to make money, but hey, that's part of the equation. So that's how our platform works. There are a couple of examples I'm giving you here of the trials we are helping to recruit for. And these are not drug trials, but the first one is we're working with Stanford University, helping them to recruit for a traumatic brain injury trial. And the trial itself is actually, requires brain surgery. They implant a medical device that stimulates the brain, so it requires brain surgery. It's a very, very serious commitment. They're looking for only 6 patients, and this is one of the leading institutes in America. It's a very well-known investigator, Dr. Jamie Henderson. They couldn't find patients because patients are scattered everywhere, right? So they had a tough time finding patients. We ran the campaigns for them. We generated like 200 leads or plus. We helped them recruit 3 patients. They're only looking for 6. So without us, they would be in big trouble. But this direct outreach, and educating the market makes sense. It's like, we use the analogy of our system works like the open table, right? How you search for Italian near me and something pops up, right? And then it helps you to make the reservation. Our system is the same way. If you're searching for traumatic brain injury, it might pop up and say, hey, there is something that could help you. And then we will connect the dots, connect them with the research site. They will pick up the phone, call them, and our software will facilitate the process. Here's another one we're helping with. It is painful bladder syndrome, basically, a common condition, and they had a hell of a time finding patients because patients aren't walking into the physician's office every day and saying it. They're only seeing like much smaller population of patients. So reaching them through digital media, made a lot of sense. And outside of these, we are also recruiting for very, very rare conditions, where there are only like 1,000 patients in the entire country, or 5,000 in a country of 320 million people, right? So that's the United States. So that's how the system works, and our whole idea is really how can we use the newer technology, how can we put a platform that facilitates the whole process of connecting patients to the trial, and then the back end to manage those leads, provide them the tools, because it's hard work. You can't just get a patient right in the door. You have to work through hundreds of patients to recruit 10, because you have to talk to them, you have to inform them, they may not have the exact condition or the stage. So that's patient. I encourage you to take a look at Patient Wing and let others know. It's we are talking to a lot of companies. We are 2 years into this venture. working with Stanford, but we're not working with Penn or CHOP, but I'm talking to them too. So this is a product that a lot of businesses, or I say business healthcare organizations like research sites and can benefit from. It's also pharmaceutical companies, right? So pharmaceutical companies are also pushing drugs. NIH is doing it. So it's a huge, huge challenge, and we think this helps all parties. So we're 2 years into it. The company is still young because we pivoted. So I'm 4 years into this company and 2 years into it. We think this is an amazing opportunity from a commercial perspective. It is something that is much more meaningful for our team to work on, because ultimately, we're connecting these patients who desperately need those treatments. So thank you for your time. I'm here for questions. If you have any, please visit patientwing.com when you get a chance. Thank you.